Choices, choices, and more choices, right? There was a workshop given by Youth Specialties Incorporated. And they were talking about youth ministry, of course. And he said, this was back in 1987, said, kids nowadays don't have one or two choices. They have multiple options given to them for choices. It's not either or anymore. Unless you live in Chatfield, Minnesota, population 1,800, and you got a school and a church, and that's it. No bowling alley. Nothing else. So choices are pretty limited. But around here, we have lots of choices. And think about this, too. Back in 1987, how do you contact people? You just send them a letter in the mail, call them on the phone, or if you see them in person. What ways of communication do we have now? Well, you've got mail, you've got telephone, you've got person-to-person, you've got email, you've got Facebook, you've got Twitter, you have texting, you have probably more than I can even announce. So there's many things going on. We have many choices confronting us every day. What are we going to do? What are we going to decide to do? Do we take this choice and maybe be good, maybe it won't? Are the choices black and white? Sometimes. Sometimes they're a shade of gray. We're not exactly sure where to go. One thing we know for certain is when we make our choices, good or bad, God is with us in the process, although sometimes we don't feel God necessarily right there with us. Some choices are easy. Well, maybe not. I'm thinking about Baskin-Robbins. 27 different flavors of ice cream sitting out there in the cabinet. So which one do you choose? Well, let me taste each one of them. I'm not sure what I want to do. And then you have, well, I've got this Rocky Road, and then I've got this peanut butter brickle thing over there. And then some of us can't decide. Then we go right back to cookie dough and chocolate, peanut butter, or something like that. Many things open up for us. We make good decisions and bad decisions. We choose. Hopefully we choose wisely. Although some of our choices, even bad choices, can be turned for good. I've made some bad choices, but yet it brings me to this point here in my life. And that's a good thing. Some choices are difficult. Do I continue on with my treatment, or do I say, I've had enough, I'm tired? That's it. What kind of choices do we make? Thinking about the gospel, thinking about the entire Bible, we think about God and God's choices. God chooses to create this world livable with water and air and sun and food from the ground. And God chooses His prophets. He chooses people. He chooses Abraham to make sure that he sends out into the world God's plan, God's love throughout the nations, to create something new. In New Testament times, let me put it this way. Let's say you're a business owner, you're head of human resources, or you're a manager and you need people for your company. So normally what you do is you receive applications in, you read the applications, you may have a pile that high, you may have some applications which are more interesting than others, and then you sift through, you cut it down to 10, to 5, to 2. You decide to interview certain people, they come in, you interview them, and you offer them a position or not. How many managers go out and handpick their people to work for them? There are few that can do that and will do that. I'm thinking about Jesus' time when rabbis often sat back like that business owner and waited for all these promising students to come to them and offer their services and say, I want to be your disciple. These are my credentials. And so the rabbi would take all these credentials and he would look them over and sift them through, and he'd pick the top, the cream of the crop. Always the cream of the crop, and then he would take his handful of disciples, or how many he could handle, and then he had them for a number of years and taught them and nurtured them in the way of his philosophy, of his theology. Jesus comes along as a rabbi and turns it upside down. He was the one that doesn't sit and wait for applications for the cream of the crop. He goes out and he chooses Peter, Andrew, James, John, Judas. He chooses all these people that wouldn't even think about putting an application in. And even if they did, they would not even get a second glance by these rabbis, because who were they? Yet Jesus chooses all these people to be part of his plan, to be part of his work in the world. These unlikely candidates were chosen by Jesus, and they failed oftentimes. Even at the end, when they all either left, betrayed, abandoned him, or whatever, and left him by himself to suffer his death, to be later formed together in a cohesive group that died for their beliefs later on. These were the people chosen by Jesus. God chooses. And sometimes we scratch our head and say, why in the world did you make that choice? That doesn't make any sense at all. Yet as we look at the view of life and a worldview later on, we can see the grace, the beauty, the brilliance of these choices. And so we have Jesus saying, I choose you. Choose life. You as people, choose life. Choose my way. Choose me and live. You have lots of choices in your life. But if you're making mistakes, if you're like the second son who says, I will do it and then don't do it, fine. You've chosen. But have you lived? Is it giving you life? Is it life-giving? Your decision, is it life-giving? Jesus wants to give us life. Jesus makes it abundantly clear that he's provided for us to give us life. I heard this morning, faith, family, and friends. Wow, that's powerful stuff. We have all that we need to live a life full of the Spirit, to choose life, to turn around at any time in our lives when we make bad choices, to turn around and live, because God has chosen us to begin with. Jesus chooses us for life. Amen.